So my axiom is I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am is a statement about existence. If existence wasn't a thing, then we couldn't be sitting here having this conversation. The existence knows about the content. Everything we categorize inside of reality is fundamentally a single unchanging content occurring instantaneously. And you can even start wondering, how could we even be having this conversation? How can anything be happening if time isn't occurring at all? How can we say something as crazy as time is not real? Can we create a universe, or can we imagine a universe where time isn't real and we can still have these kinds of experiences and have subjective agents that experience change and choice and what we consider free will? Yes, we can. So if we look at this colorful circle, we can kind of start to understand how we could have a universe in which no time, or rather nothing is changing throughout some dimension that we call time. It's all happening instantaneously or existing just as existence, yet we're still having this experience of things progressing. The experience of time that we have is another higher spatial dimension. So we are three-dimensional objects progressing through different permutations of that 3D space over what we call time. This is what a fourth dimension necessarily is. It's not even that complicated. So if we take a two-dimensional object and we give it this property of time, and we see that it is slowly shrinking, and so there's actually a sphere present, and the third dimension is really time, and there is a progression in one positive direction of that spatial dimension, and that's giving us this two-dimensional change of the circle. This arrow represents a fourth dimensional stretching of a three-dimensional human being. We are going to take a range of that human fourth dimensional object, specifically taken out of the brain. This range is not infinitesimally small. That is to say, it is not a discrete moment, because we cannot have discrete moments. It is so fine and so small that from the human perspective, it is a moment. But from the universe's perspective, it doesn't break this idea that there is no separation of parts, right? So we're not picking a discrete part, we're picking just a very, very, very small range that is still a human experience, or what we define as a human experience, but not so small that it falls out of that definition or category of what we call a human experience. The experience of time is actually the knowing of three particular parts of information that our brain simulates, or rather knows about. Okay, so those three parts are as follows. We have the experience of coming from a moment, the experience of going to a moment, and the experience of currently being in a moment. These three pieces of information that the brain knows about aren't simply pieces of information written on a piece of paper. They are information about a simulated experience of being a single conscious being, coming from a moment, being in a moment, and going to another moment. Right? So when existence knows about this particular range of the human experience inside of the brain, it knows that there is this experience of being a single individual agent who is coming from a previous moment, who is currently inside of a moment, and is currently going to a moment. And so if you can kind of wrap your head around this, what we're saying is that these are fourth dimensional, or rather higher dimensional objects that are stretched out through the content of reality, or rather we are categorizing the distinct phenomena of the human existence stretched out through what we term as time, but we can think of here as a higher dimension of space. And existence is knowing the structure of the brain that is simulating and providing itself the information of the experience of being single, individuated, coming from a moment, going to a moment, and being in a moment. So if we've done away with time, then we can also say that there is no such thing as undetermined outcomes. Rather, all of reality, all of time is already determined, and there is no such thing as indeterministic outcomes. Subjective reality, from our perspective as an agent, is indeterministic. This is because we do not have access to all of the content, to all of reality, and as a result, we can never know with certainty that particular outcomes are going to happen. So in our diagram on the bottom left here, we have a ball and we have a force pulling down at 10 meters per second. Okay, so we can think of it like gravity. And in this situation, from the universe's perspective, there is a single predetermined outcome. The universe knows with 100% certainty that the ball is going to end up in that location. But from our perspective, from a subjective agent's perspective, we cannot make the same claim because we necessarily do not have all of the information about the system. What is the boundary of this system? There is no boundary besides the categories that we are placing upon it as a brain that is computing a broader definition of existence. And so if we're trying to look for all of the information about the system, we're never going to be able to find it because all of the information about the system is actually just saying all of the information contained within existence, right? And so if we have all of the information contained within existence, then we are existence, right? We are the universe. We are everything containing everything. If we're not, then we necessarily do not have access to the entirety of the system, and therefore we cannot determine with certainty exactly what is going to happen. So we could say there is some prediction or there is some probability of some outcome based upon how we understand reality to operate. Let's put this in the perspective of quantum mechanics. There is an indeterminability about what is going to happen when we are observing or measuring the pieces of quantum phenomena. In order to do so, we are making a claim about functions, about the functionality of reality and how it operates. So in a deterministic reality, or rather from the perspective of reality itself, where everything is already existing inside of it and predetermined, we know that if we put x into our function f of x, we know exactly what we're going to get out. So let's say in this case we get out 5 if we put in 5. Let's just say it's a one-to-one function. We know with 100% certainty because we are existence. We already know that the answer is 5. We already knew that the input was 5. We already knew the functionality of what was going to happen through the function as it's progressing, right? But from our subjective perspective, we have a probability of outcomes. So let's say we have 5, 4, and 3. And let's say 5 is 75%, let's say 4 is 10%, and let's say 3 is 15%. And so in order to have a function like this, the claim that we're making is that f of x has some function inside of it that allows for a distribution of probabilities, right? And what we realize in g of x is that there is also a function inside of it that is providing a distribution of probabilities. And so from our perspective, there is this sense that there is this baked in functionality of reality that is undetermined, but that is simply because we do not have access to everything within reality. We can describe existence as the domain of a function that we are the range of. So there's this concept in mathematics called the domain and the range. So if we have a function, let's say we have f of x is equal to 4x plus 1, okay? So the domain would be all of the x values. So 0, 1, 2, if we're doing integers, for example, the positive integers, then 0, 1, 2, 3 would be the domain of this function. The range would be f of x, or the value that the function takes at the domain. So for example, 0 would be 1, 1 would be 5, 2 would be 9, and 3 would be 13. The domain is essentially the input variable. The range is essentially the output variable. And then we have some function that is operating between the domain and the range. Another good example is over here, where the arrows are indicating the functionality of the function. The domain is some input into that functionality, and then we are matching it with some particular output. I have numeric values into letters as a way of more generally regarding how domain and range is talked about in this example. So when we say reality is the domain of a function that we are the range of, the domain of existence is existence. So the values of existence, quote unquote, there is no differentiation, but the existence works through the function of knowing the content. So the content is the range, or rather the experience of information of something happening is the outcome of the function that is operating on the domain of existence. So there is existence, and existence is described as known information. So the knowing is the function, the information is what is known, the existence is the set of values that we are operating across with that function. From our subjective perspective as an agent, we can think of the content of reality as the output of an infinite computational process. So let's take an example of what a computational process is. In order to find the value of pi, since it's irrational, we have to perform computation. That is to say, there is no f of x function where we can define what it's equal to and get the exact value for pi. So we can't say, what is the 10 trillionth value of pi, plug it into our function and get that value. Instead, we have to perform computation. What computation is a set of steps throughout some space or time. So the definition of pi is the circumference divided by the diameter. So we're going to do a series of steps on the information that we have to get other pieces of information. We're going to simplify our example to just saying we have a circumference that we've measured up to this granularity of 13, and we have a diameter that we've measured up to this granularity of 4. The reason that I'm saying up to this granularity is because pi is a very, very specific ratio that is only arisen out of a perfect circle. The computational process to get pi with this level of granularity would be to divide 13 by 4. So we're going to do 4 into 13, which is 12. We're going to get 1. We're going to bring down a 0 with our decimal. We're going to have 2. We're going to have 10 now. So we have 3, and then we're going to have 10. Okay, so it goes in 8, and then we're going to have 0.2, and 4 goes into 20 5 times, and then we're left with an approximate value of pi, approximately is 3.15. And so what we've done in this division process here is a computation. We have taken information, operated upon it in a predefined or defined way, and then gotten some other kind of information out of it. Right? And that is what computation is. So when we talk about reality as the output of a computational process, what we're saying is that reality is a generator function. So with the existence being the domain, everything that is inside of it that is known, and the knowing is the function, we get an output, which is the computation of that function at that particular place within existence, or rather it is the content of existence, okay? And remember, there is no differentiation, but it's impossible to describe or talk about these terms without implying or stating from our perspective some kind of differentiation of parts, because that's how we experience things, and that's what our brain is built to do. It's built to broaden the definition of what existence is.